Welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is John Verdi. I am Vice President of Policy at the Future of Privacy Forum. Thank you so much for joining us. We, FPF, and the National Auto Dealers Association are proud today to be launching a first-of-its-kind consumer guide. It's called Personal Data in Your Car. We hope that this guide will help consumers better understand how today's cars collect and use personal information. We also hope that it will help them protect their personal data as they enjoy innovative safety, convenience, and entertainment features in today's vehicles. We're handing out hard copies of the guide here in the room today, and we've made it available online. Our partners at NADA are also making copies available to thousands of dealers at their annual expo in New Orleans this week. We hope that the online version of this document will help consumers better understand data flows and privacy in today's vehicles. And we also hope that dealers will take advantage of the opportunity to download, print, and provide this guide to new car buyers. We work with car makers, technology companies, technical experts, policymakers, and consumer advocates, including Ed. So Ed, why did you participate in this effort? And why is privacy important when it comes to today's cars?
Sure. So I'm here to kind of bring a little consumer perspective. I'm with Call for Action. We're a national nonprofit that partners with media outlets to set up consumer health hotlines in cities around the country. And vehicle-related inquiries are one of the top things that our hotlines take in. Normally it's sort of used car-type topics, but we're finding that increasingly consumers are concerned about privacy issues and need more information and are seeking ways to better educate themselves on the types of data that's being collected and how that data is being used. This guide is a really great start and shows a desire by dealers and manufacturers to be transparent about how they're using that information.
So Ed, a lot of the features that use data in the latest model cars are relatively new, and consumers have questions about it. Are there particular types of data that are top of mind for consumers?
Sure, so I think a lot of consumers tend to get a little bit scared whenever location data is discussed or being collected. But in a lot of ways, it makes sense for your vehicle to have location data, especially your navigation systems. It needs to know where you're at, where you want to go, and how to connect those dots to get you there. But there's also a number of other data points that are being collected for safety features to make use of, and I think consumers will appreciate the features that are being provided, but they're also a little bit concerned about what that might mean on the back end. They don't want their driving behavior unknowingly tracked and supplied to insurance providers, for example, to possibly drive up their insurance rates in an adverse way.
Gotcha, that makes total sense. The auto privacy principles that were issued by the Alliance and by Global have strong commitments in them to transparency and being more transparent about data. They have strong commitments in them to obtaining affirmative consent for sharing sensitive information about drivers. And they have strong commitments there about limitations on sharing with law enforcement. Now, these principles are legally binding. They were released a little while ago, and so they've been in effect for some time now. And the leading car makers have all signed on and committed. So consumers are still curious and they still have questions. Why do you think that is?
I think that, as we're seeing innovation in this space, there's increasing interest in the types of things that are being used. Some things don't immediately seem necessary to a consumer, like biometric data. Why does my car need to have biometric data on me, and what benefits is that going to possibly provide?
So I think that's a great question, Ed. And that's one of the things that we try to tackle in the guide. There's a range of questions that we try to clarify. But one of the things we try to do is better explain the technology so that consumers are more comfortable with understanding what data is being collected, how it's being used, and then they can make informed choices about what data they want to share and with whom they want to share. To take your example of biometric data, I think it's a really good one because it's not immediately obvious to a lot of folks why cars would be collecting biometric data at all. And cars today, and cars that are going to be coming off the line in the coming months and years, are using biometric data in a variety of ways. So one example is some cars are sensing a driver's eye position, and whether or not a driver's eyes are open or closed or somewhere in between, to try to combat distracted driving. It's a critical safety feature, particularly when it comes to some of the semi-autonomous vehicles that are out there, and the semi-autonomous modes that are out there. The other reason we found the cars were collecting biometric information is to enable personalization based on driver identity, or to better authenticate drivers. So some cars collect biometric data like fingerprints and face prints, and things along those lines, in order to make sure that the driver is actually authorized to operate the vehicle, or to personalize the driving experience in the way that some folks are familiar with, typically with presets of driver 1, driver 2, driver 3. This provides more convenience and greater accessibility for some disabled drivers.
I think that's really helpful. But another great thing that the guide does, and that car buyers and renters should be thinking about, is how you scrub your personal data from a car when you turn it back in or go to sell it. Consumers should think about how they protect their privacy in vehicles in similar ways to when they sell computers or mobile devices or are looking to dispose of those types of items. You need to delete your data so the next owner or renter might not be able to access it. We sync our phones with cars, our mobile apps are linked to vehicles. There's a constant back and forth, and it's important to make sure that you're getting rid of what you can to help mitigate the risk of others being able to access that information when they get into the vehicle after you do. You should definitely delete your garage door code settings, because you don't want the next person who buys your car to be able to roll up in your driveway and open your garage door while you're away at work. And that's a feature that's been in vehicles for much longer than any of the exciting stuff we're talking about, but that's still something that consumers aren't keeping front of mind when they go through this process of transitioning a vehicle to a new owner.
That's very true, and I think those are all really good tips for folks. It also seems like those tips are increasingly important when folks rent cars, right? And they link up their mobile devices that can often have lots of sensitive data about us, whether it's our contacts lists or location information or other data about us, with rental cars. Because the rental car link up is something that folks probably do much more often than they do sell a car, buy a new car. I mean, I surely rent cars more often than I buy and sell them. I'm sure there's some people who are different, but it seems like that's a key focus for folks. When you do rent a car, when you are on some kind of short-term lease and you're going to turn that back in, you don't necessarily want the next driver being able to access your location history or being able to call up your mom or your dad or your sister or your kid, right?
Yeah, and we're seeing that. It happens so quick. You plug in your phone to the USB port to charge it, and suddenly your phone's syncing with the vehicle, grabbing information off the vehicle to help you better use the vehicle. And most of us are in a hurry to catch that flight and never think about hitting the delete on the way out the door.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And that's one of the things that's super challenging in the auto space. In the broader technology world, there's this concept of providing lots of really meaningful, either just-in-time notices or contextual notices about how data is being collected or shared. And as you said, in the auto space, these interactions happen fairly quickly, and they happen fairly quickly for a reason, right? Because you don't want technology distracting the driver from the core operation. That's unsafe. So automakers and rental car agencies and drivers and everybody need to make really quick decisions about data. And I think that's one of the reasons why you and others in the group and folks at FPF and NADA think it's really important to have printed, hard copy, and online versions of this guidance so that folks can better understand these data flows when it's not the heat of the moment. Because they aren't going to get those just-in-time notices that could distract them from operating the vehicle.
Yeah, and education and transparency, and this goes a long way to facilitating that.
Well, I appreciate all the work that you and Call for Action do on that issue generally, and specifically on the subject of connected cars. Look forward to continuing that work together. And I see that we're out of time. I do want to thank you for helping to launch this guide here today. I think it's going to be super interesting to see how users better control their data and make choices about their data as they go forward in this space. I also think it's going to be interesting about how dealers play a role in educating consumers and how OEMs can play a role in educating consumers. So I would just ask folks, if you haven't gotten a hard copy, we do have some available. Do go ahead and contact either Ed or myself or our policy leads on these issues if you want to chat more about these interesting subjects. And feel free to go ahead and share the online information as well, the direct URL to the guide, and some of the tweets that we're sending out on social media right now. So Ed, thank you so much for helping me run this today.